Hello, this is Joseph Gillette with Global Intel Hub. This is a video about an amazing topic that I'm going to start doing videos like this because there's no other way to really put this into a bigger context. And this is something that will just change your life. That's how powerful this is. So the content for today is about this book. And I'm only, to be honest, halfway through. But it seems like this is like the encyclopedia of our history. So let me give you a quick background on Global Intel Hub and why this book is important and who is the author. So Global Intel Hub was established in 2010 as a deep analysis group that we look at financial markets. We're Wall Street people, we are traders, we're investors. But the larger story is we're looking at alternative history. That means we don't know what the truth is necessarily, but we know that the mainstream narrative is wrong. And if you look at COVID or the human creation story, where we came from, and we're interested in that, but we're also interested in current events. In other words, where's the money? When the short sellers are doing lots of research, like Hindenburg research and Bill Ackman and groups like this, they look at fraud, but they also look at companies who are lying about their balance sheets. So if there's any lie or misleading information or untruth, that's usually going to lead to some kind of information arbitrage, where you know something that the public doesn't know because the company is lying. Like, you know they're lying, and you build a thesis. And that's kind of the model of Global Intel Hub, is we look at something, and it could be anything. I mean, our focus is financial markets because we're doing this for our job, but also we have other interests in technology, in spirituality, in deep history. So in our intelligence gathering, you have, as you do, sources. And those sources could be a website, it could be a person, they call it human int, it could be something you subscribe to, it could be a lot of things. It could be a place, it could be books or an author or a series of books. So a lot of the topics that we research are very obtuse. So how do you analyze something where the person who has the real information is spending billions of dollars trying to hide that? And that happens a lot in our industry, actually, Wall Street. Like, let's say that fraud is a great example. So let's say someone has a fraud. Bernie Madoff has a fraud. Bernie Madoff is going to spend millions of dollars creating all these stories hiding his fraud. And that's the case for lots of trading strategies, because a lot of times, if someone else finds out what your strategy is, if many people do it, there's no more strategy. So you have an incentive to hide the truth. That's a Wall Street thing, but that same dynamic applies to many things. Like, for example, science. There is a concerted effort to hide the truth about human origins. And I just need a little background, so stick with me, because it's important about this book. Two things. Let's go into primordial soup, which is a total lie, and the Cavendish experiment about the solid iron molten earth. Okay, these are two things that are just ridiculous, absurd lies. So let's start with the primordial soup. So mainstream science says man was created by an event that happened billions of years ago, where there was primordial soup, which is basically just mud. But it was not like mud of today. It had just very basic proteins and ancient soils that really don't exist in the same way like they do today. And then lightning struck this primordial soup, and it created little proteins, and then eventually amoebas and what they call protoplasmatic reticulum, which is a organism which only has a mouth and an anus. And then we evolved into frogs, fish, dinosaurs, or whatever that they say. But the problem with this is two things. Number one, we cannot replicate it, and people have tried. Number two, there's evolutionary leaps that cannot be explained. So, for example, the the primordial soup by itself, action is so remote. The chance of this happening is so remote. They've calculated it's like one in a. I don't know the numbers, so I don't want to quote it, but it's so remote. But let's say that it happened. Then there's no logical explanation for how did the thing evolve from A to B, and it's several gaps. So like you can explain the amoebas to proteins to some multi-celled organisms, but you can't explain the leap from that to fish or to dinosaurs or to monkeys or to man or all those connections. Like monkeys to man is a huge gap. We have ancestors that we can trace roots to, like Homo erectus and these different groups, Neanderthals, but we can't link Neanderthals to monkeys. There's a small problem. We share a lot of DNA with apes, but there's more things that are different, and especially certain things about how our brain works, and just a lot of things actually. And here's a whole other thing that I could go off on a tangent on: junk DNA. So when science doesn't understand something, it's black matter. 95% of the universe is black matter or dark matter that we don't understand. So it's the same thing here. So the point is, when you're looking at something that's very obtuse, that means like the spiritual world is another good example. How do you reference something or research something where the only way to go there is to either through astral traveling or to die? The problem is you can't bring back any evidence. So there's no way to prove anything. So the answer is there is a methodology. As they say, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So the way is you corroborate evidence. So you corroborate witness testimony with facts, with other things. Like in the Bible, there's lots of facts. Well, do those facts add up to any real things? Well, yes, you can go to Solomon's temple, and there are physical things that, like the king's tablet in Sumeria. It's a physical thing that talks about kings that lived for 100,000 years and so on and so forth. And it says in the king's tablet that the beings came to Earth and taught man all these things. So that's considered to be myth. But when you corroborate that with stories of people who had past life regressions, out of body experiences, and so on and so forth, you start to build a picture of truth based on all of these different data points. So you're collecting different kinds of data points. And that's what this book is doing. So Dolores Cannon she's deceased, but she was not targeted. It was from a previous generation. She was doing past life regressions. And in those past life regressions, it was a very scientific method. So let me just say this first. She invented this QHHT method, and she created a method of hypnosis where she would put the patients under and start collecting data, and she would record it and then write it down. So she was recording everything. And what ended up happening, the stories started to match up. So people who didn't know each other started telling stories about past lives in Atlantis or other facts, and they started matching up. And these people were in other states. They didn't know each other. So she realized that these people were actually living these were real experiences. So she honed down her strategy of doing the hypnosis, that it was more information collection and it was very scientific. Now, she was a healer. She was doing this to heal people, but what would end up happening, someone would come in for a healing, and then she started communicating with entities from other dimensions. That's really what's wild. And then these entities started to have an ongoing years-long conversation with her. And so she started asking these entities questions. And it's a book that you just have to read, because I'm not going to get into summarizing it, but I just wanted to put out there the the importance of it. Like, for example, I just turned to one page, the Ark of the Covenant. So she explains that the Ark was kind of like a communication tool between the humans and the spirit world. And a lot of this about the Ark was dangerous. A lot of that, she said, was actually a story that they wanted to keep people away from it, like it was dangerous. But it may have contained some kind of energy. It wasn't a weapon, but if you touched it when it was active, you may have been shocked or killed. So there was that. There were several arcs. She explained what happened to them. One of them, interestingly, was purchased by a billionaire and kept in an undisclosed location. That's interesting. I mean, this book has answered so many questions I've had. And now, some of the information, she even says, some of the stories contradict, it seems like. But I found this also to be true when you're researching obtuse topics, whether it's an investment strategy or something of the astral plane. You're going to have, at the end of the day, you have to develop a multidimensional intelligence. Now, here's the problem. We're taught to think linearly. And so when you have multidimensional outlook on things, everything kind of fits like a puzzle. And I'll give you one example, like time. So time, we think of like a line. You're born, you die, next lives happen. But in the real world, that's not how time works. We live in like a linear time bubble. But then if you leave that bubble, you can go back, you can go forth, you can go up, down to different dimensions. And there are beings out there who can exactly do that. Like, in other words, these people who are abducted or visited, they may have a visitation when they're a baby or when they're young, and then when they're 50 or with their kids. That could be 5 minutes in universal time. It's not that time doesn't exist, is that time is different on Earth than it is in the universe, than it is on other planets. So things may happen, 10,000 years on Earth may be a couple minutes somewhere else. This is outlined very interestingly in the classic movie Interstellar. And they explain it in Interstellar that it has to do with gravity. It's a good metaphor. It's a lot more complicated than that, I think, but it's a good metaphor. And when they go on this one planet, every hour they spend there, it's like 7 years on Earth. So when Matthew McConaughey comes back, his child is much older than him. It's such a touching film. I definitely recommend watching Interstellar. But they explain all that in the book about time and about the Nazca lines. And so they basically explain, for me, the big takeaway was the facts were cool about Atlantis, about many things, but the multidimensional analysis mind frame you have to have is really important, because when you get into a lot of this material, the problem is we don't really have a method to research it. And these beings basically are telling you, it's like you're communicating with these beings. And they said something in the book that was chilling when I read it. The Dolores Cannon, who did a great job, we have to give her really good credit because this was amazing work. And she made many, many books. I don't know how many, but I'm going to read them one by one. They told her, we are communicating with your readers in the future. So, like she said about kind of why I'm chosen type of questions, they said, we're giving you this information now, and then in the future, someone is going to read this book, and that's going to cause and affect other actions that individual Earth human is going to do, which is going to be positive. And we're here to bring about basically what can be characterized as positive paradigm shift. Like the whole planet is shifting into this multidimensional existence, and they call it ascension, but ascension is really a buzzword. This book gets into the the mechanics of how that's actually happening. A couple other just quick things. I mean, there's so many. They say crop circles are created by or with an intelligence which is the source of the planet in a higher dimension. So it's not spaceships coming down. There can be that. There can be ships creating crop circles with technology. But there's also this multidimensional intelligence where the crop circle is communicating with us through patterns and through a certain energy. And people who have visited crop circles, many of them will go into the crop circle just to look at it and they become sick. Other people have out-of-body experiences. There's all a range of things. And they talk about that in the book. And they say they resonate with different people for different reasons because of basically where their journey is at. Now, I turn to one object which I want to show, which is can you see this? It looks like almost like a broom. This was an energy device used to build the pyramids in Giza. I always wanted to know about that. So they said it was sound technology. So basically, here's the funny thing. Both stories are true. They did use slaves, but they had advanced technology. So humans had to be in this really clean state. They would eat certain foods. They couldn't have alcohol. In order to use these sound energy tools that they would hold in a hand, and the beings would give them the instructions, and then they would go like this, and they could move. They could melt quartz. They could mold it. They could move it. They could do anything. Now, one human could do this if he had the technology and the instructions. So the humans were not figuring out where all the blocks go because it was complex, but they did participate in the construction. So it was a joint project. It was ET designed, and the building was mostly done by humans using ET technology. And they said that the human slaves could see the ETs in spacecraft. But for some reason, those ETs couldn't actually land because of some energy things that they had a little protective thing going on in their spaceship. For example, and there's so many examples, which is why I just love this book and wanted to make this video. And so the summary, just to conclude here, is that this book is a source of knowledge. Now, you might say, oh, well, it's not real. Well, the way I look at this topic is, let's say that it is. Let's say it's all 100% real in this book. That doesn't mean, it's all people speaking stories. So anytime you have people speaking stories, like there's a situation with the FBI, a phenomenon. Someone is shot in the middle of the street, downtown, like in an open area. There's a murder, okay? They interview 20 people who are within 100 feet of seeing this, and you'll get all different answers from people. Why? The answer is the way the brain works is very complicated, and not everyone's going to remember the same thing. Like, for example, let's say someone was on the phone and they just had some bad news. They're not really focused on someone was shot there. They may have heard the noise, but they're not going to be. Then you have another person, let's say it was the relative of the person who was shot. They're going to remember every detail because they just lost a loved one. So everyone has a different perspective. So I'm not saying you should take any information like it's 100% truth. No, it's the opposite. Any information is data. So this is just very high quality data. It is all signal. Does it mean that it's exactly how things happened? Of course not. Because you've got a lot of things going on. You've got translation issues. So these beings are speaking English basically to the Dolores Cannon. And they even said, this is number one, the beings, the ETs very often say, I can't find words to describe, like in your language, there's no way to describe these advanced concepts. So there's going to be information loss. So it's not like this is the truth. It's that this is a unique source, which is all signal. And I don't want to get into the compare contrast, because there are some books about these topics, which are all noise. So the problem is the deep state or the groups who don't want us to learn about all this truth, they will produce books like this, which are just total nonsense. And then it conditions people, well, if this is nonsense, the whole phenomenon is nonsense. And I'll give you one bright example, is the flat earth. The flat earth is a CIA psyop. There is no question in my mind. If you look on YouTube, if you Google Tartaria and stuff like this, you'll find these YouTube videos with millions of followers. And these videos are produced they're almost like B movies. I would say that they're very good productions, but they're intentionally made like bad productions. In other words, it looks to me like a lot of this flat earth content is $1 million content, but they make it look like it's homemade. It really is a distraction. So what I'm trying to say is this is all signal, and Dolores Cannon is a brilliant genius for putting all this together for us. You're actually communicating with these beings and receiving this information. So a couple last nuggets before we end off here. One is there's a planet of information, planet Spires, where several of these humans go in the astral. And in this planet, it's an information repository, and there are guardians, and you can ask any question. And that's where they ask about Atlantis, about the pyramids. Some information is guarded because it can be dangerous to us, but you can ask any question. Atlantis was really cool. So in Atlantis, they had families. People would live in houses similar to but they were mostly independent. Like they would get together for meals. The Atlantis people were very, very, very psychic, and they could control just everything. And they had a very complex art and culture. They love music. They love fashion. They love dancing. There was music everywhere. There was dancing. They would dance just every night. They lived very nice for a long time. And then they started to use their powers for very bad things. And I don't want to say really negative, but they started to do things that were like genetic experiments and things like that, but in a way that it was against the grain of nature. And finally, this caused them to, it wasn't really a war in a traditional sense. Like the technology they had to go back, they didn't have electronics like we have, but they had, for example, their lighting was crystals. And when you would walk by, it would sense you and sense your mood and turn on the light according to what you wanted. It was almost like the lights and the house could feel you. They had offices, they had business, they were humans. They were just a little different. Their DNA was a little different. They were a little more advanced. They were all like really good looking. But then they had outside of the cities, this kind of underclass who didn't want to participate with this. They didn't believe in it. And they were kind of like how we are probably, or you could say like country people, like people living out in the rural areas. But there was a bigger difference. And they looked down on everyone. They were snobs. They were snobs with an attitude, and all of that ego, they channeled so much energy. It wasn't necessarily to say dark energy. The problem was they at first they were productive for a very long time. They did amazing things, but then they started to get more egocentric, and it basically they started doing things you should not do, like cross the streams, like mixing oil and water, and it ended up in that they were just destroyed. And some of them survived, and they went, and some of the priests went and created Egypt. So the other thing is the Egyptians, and this is a big ancient alien theory, the Egyptians inherited those pyramids. Those pyramids were made by the survivors of the Atlanteans, and the pyramid is something connected to the whole planet. It's a power plant, it's knowledge, it's healing, it's everything. It's communication, and it's just not powered. There was something sitting on top of it. it was in a container, and that none of that exists anymore because it's not active. But when the pyramid was active, it was really powerful. And the Egyptians inherited that. And what they say in the book is they say, well, why did they bury people inside? And the Egyptians it wasn't active in that time. It was just stone. So when they kind of discovered it, they said, well, what are all these chambers for? Well, it must be a burial chamber, because they didn't understand. When they mummified themselves, I mean, the Egyptians were very spiritual, but nothing like the Atlanteans. The Atlanteans could just move objects with their minds. They were just on a whole nother level. So it was like a car that wouldn't start. What use is a car if it doesn't start? I mean, you can live in it, but it's basically like a paperweight. So that's all in this book. The history of the pyramids, the Egyptians, subsequent cultures. And I'm looking forward to reading more books, but I wanted to put this out there because it's very hard to find sources when you're researching these topics. And there's a lot of dead ends that are artificial dead ends. So they'll have you going down a rabbit hole only to find a certain author is basically paid to write gibberish. And you think, well, why would these authors do that? Well, money is the quick answer. If you're a struggling author, you have a family, how the deep state controls people is money. How many authors who are struggling after years of struggling, maybe they have a family, whether they're living alone or family, it's just another pain point to manipulate you. It could be anyone at any age, any race. They're not, they will manipulate anyone. They don't care. They give you millions of dollars. Of course, you're going to write a book and say whatever nonsense they want. It's like paid advertising. I mean, everybody does it. It's how they control people. Now, in Atlantis, there was no money. They did have a means of exchange. I mean, no, there was money, but not in the way that we understand money. There was a means of exchange, and they did business. They did trade. It was really cool. But it wasn't like today. Like there's a central bank, it produces money, and then you have to work because your money is like, it's like a game. What we have today is a sad game of hot potato. It's a debt slavery. So you get $1,000 for your job, and you got to go spend it real quick before it becomes worthless. And it's stretched out over time. So inflation is probably realistically 20% a year. But that means in 5 years, money is worthless. Like if you look at groceries, housing, anything. Okay, maybe it's 10%, but whatever it is, it's not 2%, that's for sure. So what's the margin of utility, the marginal difference that they're screwing us? I mean, is it 5% or 10%? It doesn't matter. The point is, it's all going to zero. It's just a question of time. And you can't hedge that. The elite are able to make investments where they can invest and get 500x returns, 100x returns. But you need millions of dollars to invest in those assets. So the elite have this control system that they didn't have in previous civilizations. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for watching. Definitely check out the book and subscribe to Global Intel Hub, either on YouTube or our blog. And I wish everyone who's watching this a blessed day, and may you manifest good things for the week ahead and for the months and years ahead as well, for you, your family, your business, and everyone around you. Thank you. Have a great day.